Greetings. This will be a special video report and astrologue of the cataclysmic eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. This video will look with an astrological lens of what was taking place celestially just prior to this major volcanic eruption. After 123 years of dormancy, Mount St. Helens started to show signs of major changes, with a swarm of shallow earthquakes directly under its north face on March 15 of 1980. Then just 5 days later, a magnitude 4.2 earthquake struck, marking the first substantial indicator that the volcano was becoming highly active. We're now looking at a celestial snapshot of what was taking place at the exact time of the Mount St. Helens volcanic eruption on May 18 of 1980. Now, the major celestial drivers were Neptune squaring Saturn, holding this position for quite a while, Uranus also moving into a hard square with the lunar nodes, but the obvious foundational driver, the Mars-Jupiter aspect, as from December of 1979 into May of 1980, Mars-Jupiter would move into a triple conjunction, forming a geodetic profile over the volcano itself. Showing a visual perspective with solar system scope in the months preceding this major volcanic eruption. We note in December of 1979 the Mars-Jupiter orbits are in sync with the Earth, and we get the first Mars-Jupiter conjunction at Earth's elongation point. Mars and Jupiter then meet Earth and Sun in February of 1980, giving us the second Mars-Jupiter conjunction timeframe. And finally, Mars joins Earth and Jupiter again for the third time, giving us the third conjunction of Mars and Jupiter in May of 1980, just 11 days prior to this volcanic eruption. Now going to be using astrocartography, which will map the planets geodetically to the Earth to determine the planetary drivers that facilitated this major volcanic eruption. Now, Mount St. Helens received a swarm of earthquakes on May 15 and 16 around the north face of the volcano, signalling a reawakening of Mount St. Helens after 123 years of dormancy. But importantly, if we have a look at the planetary aspects just a few weeks prior, note that we have a stationed Uranus connecting into lunar nodes. It's weak and will be tightening as we move ahead. Mars is making a conjunction with Jupiter, its second conjunction, as mentioned. There were three. And we have Neptune and Saturn forming a square, and that will be tightening as we move forward. We're now going to animate the astrocartography software and focusing on the planetary positions just prior to this major event. We have the Uranus station position offshore around Cascadia, its station squaring the lunar nodes. And just zooming into the region of Mount St. Helens, note the position and the conjunction taking place between Mars and Jupiter at this time. We're now into March of 1980. We get to see a conjunction taking place between Lilith, which is the Moon's farthest point of its orbit of the Earth, connecting with the lunar node. And we start to see some fairly significant tightening in the chart aspects on the left-hand side. Mars connects at square aspect with the lunar node, so this is a very significant aspect just to the western side of the volcano. Note the date, the 20th of March. This is the first major signs of activity for Mount St. Helens, where a 4.2 magnitude earthquake struck the north face, right at the exact time where Mars connects with the lunar node. We started to see an acceleration in volcanic activity across Mount St. Helens late March of 1980, and we can see above that Neptune and Saturn were forming a perfect square, and Uranus was tightening also at square with the lunar node. Note that Mars connecting into the north node separates, and now station of Mars reconnects back into the lunar node, and then Jupiter will do the same. So we get to see Mars and Jupiter connecting the node quite strongly, and a major focus for this major event to come. Jupiter stations late April, soon to be joined by a conjunction of Mars early May, just prior to this major volcanic eruption. We're now going back to 1974, and this is the fairly significant foreshadowing for the Mount St. Helens eruption. We have a look at this chart. We have a very powerful interaction here. Jupiter is now squaring into the node while at station, so it's about to make its retrograde, and it'll be in sync with the node, which is powerful and very important. Note that we have a 150-degree aspect, almost perfect, with Mars, and Mars is connecting into the north node and south node, specifically the north node at trine. In 2 hours' time, Mars separates with Jupiter's station. Mars now separates from the trine of the node, while Jupiter holds this position. Just going to continue the animation. But this is a very strong aspect, and it is a common feature with major events. Note that the Venus position is now connecting into the south node. So we have some very significant interactions taking place, and Jupiter still at station. Now moving it very slowly, we're starting to see the angles starting to separate. But importantly, we note that we now have a retrograding Jupiter working back with the node, and the nodes always move back in a retrograde motion. Now this is the smoking gun for the Mount St. Helens eruption. We go back to July of 1974. This time we get Mars moving across, its square aspect moving across Mount St. Helens. And we see it hitting this perfectly. We have a very strong feature in the chart. We have a conjunction between Mercury and Saturn, and Venus is squaring Pluto at the same time as Mars is moving across the region. Its square aspect represents the above position, which is midday and midnight position with this chart. Note that just 2 hours later we have Jupiter forming a perfect interaction with both lunar nodes. So there's just a fairly powerful interaction between Jupiter and Mars. They are connected at this time frame. Note that we have some very powerful planetary alignments and connections taking place during this same time frame, and note that the Sun is also right on the descending node, which is a very powerful configuration. So just emphasizing this chart is quite powerful. We'll get a station of Jupiter while squaring the lunar node, the red triangle, and the blue triangle is Mars, just 2 hours later configured into the north node at trine. So this is connecting Mars and Jupiter, just 2 hours of separation right over the volcano itself of Mount St. Helens in 1974. Now just a few days later we get Venus connecting into the south node below, forming another blue triangle, and also the Sun is configured also into the node on the same day, and that's that green triangle or 150-degree aspect, this time into the north node. So we get a series of very strong planetary connections into the lunar node, but importantly Jupiter and Mars are highly significant and connected during this time frame. We now progress into August of 1974 and take a look at this chart. Mars has now moved into an opposition of Jupiter, which is stationed, so we get a very powerful planetary alignment between the same planets. Mars is also connecting into the lunar node at square aspect, so we get a grand cross between Jupiter and Mars with the lunar node. Venus is connecting into Neptune at trine. We have a very powerful Earth-Mercury-Sun planetary alignment that has just taken place. And if that's not enough, Saturn is connected into the planetary alignment of Mars and Jupiter at trine. This is an amazing chart marking the symmetry of Mars and Jupiter that were in sync back in 1974, and the reflection coming later on just prior to the major volcanic eruption. We'll now progress into December of 1974, and Jupiter forms another square into the lunar node due to a retrograde phase. And have a look at what's going on with the lunar node. We have Mercury and Neptune forming a conjunction with the lunar node. And have a look at the position of Mars. Mars is positioned directly overhead Mount St. Helens, and Uranus is connecting as well, just moving across with its square aspect over the ascending and descending node. Now progressed into 1977 in the month of March, and just following the Mars and Jupiter connection, this time they're making a square aspect, and note their position. Their square is focused geodetically to the west of Mount St. Helens. On the same day we get an Earth-Mercury-Sun planetary alignment, and Venus is at station while connecting into the south lunar node. So it does seem that Jupiter and Mars were the key foundational driver for this major volcanic eruption for North America and Mount St. Helens. But the main foundation will definitely be Jupiter squaring the lunar node and holding this while at retrograde phase. And this is a significant aspect with major events across the globe. And most recently, the Tonga volcanic eruption near Tonga also had Jupiter squaring the lunar nodes, and the volcano erupted the following month. While the software is configured over Mount St. Helens, I thought I'd look forward to see if there's any future events possible for Mount St. Helens and some possible volcanic activity and activation. I'm then going to show with astrocartography a period in 2039 where we get to see some amazing planetary connections and geometries all focused around Mount St. Helens. Now the main foundational driver will be Saturn, as it will be squaring the lunar node, both of them, and it will be stationing and turning retrograde and moving in sync with the node for about 6 to 7 weeks. Now as it does so, we have other planets merging into very powerful configurations into the node. On one side, Jupiter will form a trine aspect into the south node, and so will Neptune, and they'll form a grand trine with the south node. We can see that Mercury is already connecting into the node, and I'm just going to animate the software and take a look at Neptune also connecting at square with Uranus. Just going to animate the software. We're going to see a stationed Saturn now turning back in sync with the lunar node. Mars connects into the south node. See how Jupiter is very strong into the south node as well. Neptune's starting to get strong as well, so we get this very strong configuration. Sun and Uranus opposition. There's so much going on in this chart. Now Jupiter's starting to weaken off the node, but it's still holding a very strong configuration. Neptune is now 150 degrees with Saturn. Look how strong this chart is. It's getting even more powerful. Now we have Jupiter moving across. I'll just bring that back. Jupiter's square aspect is perfect right over the volcano, Mount St. Helens. Note that Jupiter is in position while we get Saturn within 15 minutes of a perfect square with the lunar nodes. Uranus is also at trine aspect with the south node. So this is an extremely powerful configuration. Note that we have very powerful planetary alignments about to take place. Pluto is now opposing Jupiter. Venus will start to oppose Saturn. So it's just so much going on. I'm going to continue the animation. We're now going to see Mars coming through. Look how tight this configuration is, and look how powerful the chart is. It's just absolutely astonishing. And then we have this configuration coming through. Mars will join Saturn just to the eastern flank of Mount St. Helens. And the configurations and geometries in this chart is astonishing. I've never seen anything quite like it. The most powerful configuration and chart aspects at one given time that I've ever seen. So 2039 looks to be the release time frame for this event. If we have a look in 2037, the foreshadows, we get a double opposition between Mars and Uranus. At the same time, Venus and Saturn forming a fairly significant aspect in the chart, and that is in February of 2037. And the following month we get another very significant configuration. Note that we have a conjunction taking place, or crossing, of both Saturn and Mars. Mars's trine and Saturn's square aspect focus this time to the western side of the Volcano caldera and Mount St. Helens. So in 2037 we get a Mars and Saturn interaction, 150 degree aspect, which is a trine and square interacting to the western side, and on release time frame we get Saturn and Mars having the same connection on the eastern side of the volcano itself. Now looking further forward, we go to 2052 and we get a very powerful station of Neptune right in the volcano caldera, and something to consider further down the road. It seems that Mars and Jupiter, their movement back in 1974 and their symmetry involved with the lunar nodes are a key indicator of what was to take place, and a direct reflection of their future movement just 6 years later, just prior to this major volcanic eruption and their triple conjunction. The geodetic position and also geometry of the planets in February of 2039 may be an indication of new activity for Mount St. Helens. Definitely something to consider and keep close note of. That concludes this special presentation of the Mount St. Helens eruption of 1980 and planetary drivers that facilitated this major event. More information can be found at earthsignals.com, and thanks for watching.